Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my experience testing Mythic Plus for Season 1 in the War Within. If you watch this stream, you know that what I'm about to say will come as no surprise. This is an incredibly frustrating and difficult experience. I'm actually really shocked at how difficult the dungeons were, and I don't understand why. There was some difficulty that was artificial because of some bug with tuning in the very beginning. That seemed to get smoothed out pretty much instantly. It was also weird that the keys weren't working for the first 15 minutes, but other than that, everything seemed to work properly in terms of actual, what was intended. But we were tested at what people were saying was the equivalent of somewhere between LFR and normal item level. I don't know if that's true or not. But regardless, we started by doing a 10. Got absolutely destroyed. There was no affixes at all at that point. We did Grim Batol. A lot to say about Grim Batol. Basically, TLDR on Grim Batol is they did not remove the dragon riding portion like I would have want them to, but they changed it heavily to the point where you probably can't kill any individual pack. And I don't know what the timer and stuff is going to look like. That was my big concern with that dungeon, was that you were going to basically, if one player didn't use them well, you'd be totally screwed. And people would just disband over that. But I don't really think that could happen in the way it is now, unless it obviously can happen, but will it happen? I think it'd be way less likely. I would still advocate for them to remove it outright, but I think this is a way better situation. But anyway, Grim Batol destroyed us. We tried 10, we tried 9, we got our ass kicked in there. Then ultimately we settled on 5. At that point they had fixed it, so there was actual fixes. It was the one that gave us more damage to nature and bleed, and also made casters do more damage. And then it was also sanguine, but we never actually did a key that was a 7 or whatever it was going to be, so we never got to see sanguine, thank God. But yeah, the affix, in terms of the affix, I would say it did nothing. I didn't even notice it. Totally passive, completely, frankly, just irrelevant. But that's not saying a lot about the affix, because I was just getting, I'm all over the place right now, but just getting through the dungeon itself was a monumental task. Every single dungeon we did was incredibly difficult. And the new War Within dungeons especially were frankly kind of frustrating, because now this is on me because I didn't do any type of pre-planning for these. We walked right into Mythic Plus, and that's the first time I ever did those 4 dungeons. So that's on me for sure. But it was really strange because I feel like after 20 years of WoW, whenever they make new content, I'm usually able to pick it up. If you watched me test, I think it was Season 3 on the PTR, I did the Galakron dungeons for the first time, the Dodie dungeons for the first time on there. And about 90% of it made sense to me. The weird area with the sand made no sense to me, and 2 of the bosses I had to be explained to. But everything else felt normal, and it wasn't that difficult. When I did the War Within dungeons, every single one of them was what the hell's going on? The mechanics are not well telegraphed. There's a ton of different casts in some of the dungeons, especially that one City of Threads dungeon was every single mob needed to be interrupted constantly, and a lot of mechanics that when you fail to do those small mechanic things, it makes it compound heavily. That dungeon especially stands out because there was a time when the caster was constantly trying to knock us back, and if we didn't frequently if we didn't stop them from knocking us back, they would knock us into other things that would spawn trash. So it was really difficult. That was probably the hardest 6 hours of Mythic Plus I've ever done in my life. And nothing I've done in Season 4 of Dragonflight was anywhere near that difficult. So the question now is is this because of, well, it could be because of classes and tuning there, but I don't think that's the case. So is it because of dungeon design? Is it because of a lack of experience? Is it because of poor tuning and poor testing environments, them not giving us the right item level? I think probably it's a good 30 kind of 33 kind of percentage there. I do think the fact that we walked into a 5 and got owned is not right. There's no 5 that I've ever done. In the current season, they changed it, so a 5 used to be a 15, right? But when we did week 1 keys, it was not like that. No, you know what I mean? It wasn't even close to that. So I don't know about that part. I do think it might be a gearing thing too, though. But I do think, like I said, a good chunk of it is just inexperience. There's probably a lot of things that if I do them a second time, they'll be more obvious to me. But again, City of Threads stands out. The last trash is a trap. I don't even really understand. It was like, it seemed totally impossible mechanically. Like, I didn't understand. It gave us no indication of how to do the mechanic. And every single person died multiple. We wiped like 5 times to the trash. There's like 2 mini bosses, and they both have overlapping mechanics. And the mechanics did not seem to have any counterplay to them. Like, the one roots you, and the other one slams on top of you. So outside of just not getting rooted where the other boss is, like, that's what I was trying to recommend to DPS, is just don't attack on that side. Like, don't be near it. I don't know how you counterplay that. I'm sure years from now I'll look back at this and be like, oh my god, that was so dumb. But I don't see it. It doesn't make sense to me. And that's a problem for me, because I do feel like they're failing with their ability to balance the dungeons. Like, we did Miss Eterna Scythe, and there's nothing new in there. It's the exact same dungeon. We did Siege of Bralis. Now, I've never done it as Alliance, but I'm sure it's the exact same dungeon. Didn't get around to Necrotic Wake. I'm sure it's the exact same dungeon. So basically, you brought Kata dungeons into the mix, which is a terrible idea in the first place. Redesigned Grim Batol, so the fact that, like, literally every boss needs to be fully relearned. Not one of the bosses was the exact same. There was a lot of things that were similar, but it was mostly like thematically similar. Like, the first boss in Grim Batol was like a different encounter. Like, it's not even the same encounter. The other ones were like, oh, okay, I can see that they're somewhat similar. But yeah, realistically, it's going to be the hardest season I've ever done, I can imagine, simply because of how much there's going to be to learn. And that really sucks when you have 3 dungeons that you don't need to learn. I know a lot of people are in favor of the rotating dungeon pool, but I just don't really think it's working when you have brand new dungeons on top of the rotating dungeon pool. It just doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to rotate dungeons, you should do all new dungeons and then all old dungeons or something like that. But anyway, the dungeons themselves were kind of cool. The 4 that we tested. The Hollowfall one is awful. It's going to be one of the worst Mythic Plus dungeons they've ever made. There's a segment where you have to actually dragon ride multiple times, like in combat even. But the main problem with it is it's like pretty much exactly like Quarter Stars, in the way that there's mini bosses that have to be like aggroed in order to fight the main boss. And just like in Quarter Stars, getting those mini bosses fought is difficult for people. And this time it's going to be because there's tons of trash around them and they're moving a lot. But I think with dragon riding, it's meant to be easier. I think it's going to actually be harder with dragon riding because, as you can tell if you watch the footage, there's a lot of people out there who are not very accurate with dragon riding. So it's very easy to aggro stuff you don't intend to aggro there. Now, I think this could be easily subsided by maybe the fact that you need all the count in the area kind of thing. Like, if you look back at Quarter Stars, if every single mob in that area needed to be pulled, then you wouldn't have people like backpedaling into trash and getting surprised by trash that they're trying to skip, right? So if that same thing happens here, then it's probably okay. And people are suggesting that that may happen here. So we'll find out. Those dungeons really hit me like for just a haymaker. Like, I was totally shocked at how hard those dungeons were compared to other dungeons, and especially on level 5 compared to dungeons I experienced in Dragonflight Season 4. Now, I want to also talk about Blood DK. Here's the talents I have used, okay? We still don't have this talent here, but otherwise I'm very satisfied with this talent build. There's only one talent that I wish we can still take, and that's Improved Bone Shield for the haste. I do not feel like low haste is a problem for me. I've never felt that way. I remember back as far as BFA, I played with like 3% to 7% haste for a long time. I have 9% right now. It's probably going to be even lower than that when we do our first Mythic Plus. I don't feel like it's a problem. I've never felt like it was a problem, but I know a lot of people have trouble playing without that haste. But yeah, I don't really feel like that's a problem. So that's the only talent that I'm like, man, I think I really need that talent. I tried, there's big talking points here. I tried Bone Shield, Bone Storm. It's horrendous. It still does not seem to interact with either Shattering Bone or Dancing Rune Weapon. So basically it just takes all your Bone Shield away and does a very small amount of damage. Its healing was not like completely unnoticeable. Just like currently, like, I mean, this is basically the same problem you have with the spell right now. Like, when you have Death Strike healing for such an absurd amount and putting a massive absorb on you, and things like Umbilicus Eternus putting these massive absorbs on you, it's like 3% of your health every second is just not or whatever. It's a 15%. Like, it's just not going to make a big difference. You're not going to notice it compared to the spells that you actually press. But it's better. It's definitely better. But I see 0 times I will take the spell. And, you know, initially we were like, oh, this is going to be a broken-ass DPS spell. And it's not. It's not even close. Even when it was up, it wasn't my top damage. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. But let's talk about this first. I guess I should tell you why first, because that's important for this conversation. So Deathbringer is insane. It's awesome. I love it. It's probably my favorite thing they've ever done for any... Like, if all of the new hero talents are like Deathbringer, I'm going to be in love with this system. It visually transforms your character. If you haven't seen, it turns your Blood Boil blue. And then you do this like crazy scythe pretty much like every other time you use Mirror End or something. I don't even really understand how it procs, to be honest, but it's awesome. And it's very fun to see these crazy animations. But not only that, dude, the DPS, okay? So I'm going to show you my DPS chart. This is an overall from a DPS. Don't worry about like the numbers because we didn't finish the key, but I want you to pay attention to the actual breakdown. Top damage for overall was Blood Plague. Next up was Exterminate. Then Rune Weapon, then Blood Boil, then Reaper's Mark, then Shattering Bone. As you guys might know right now, Shattering Bone is usually 1 or 2 depending on the dungeon. And Blood Plague is usually 1 or 2 depending on the dungeon. Or Blood Boil is usually 1 or 2 depending on the dungeon. So both of those are now very low. But with this build, we have Blood Boil that does damage and then applies Blood Plague, which is top damage. And also Blood Fever. Your Blood Plague has a chance to deal 30% increased damage with Shadow Frost. So basically, these two things should be added together, and then they're all applied to Blood Boil, basically. A little bit extra than that, but yeah. So this spell, this Blood Boil spell is effectively doing like 25 to 30% of your damage with that one global. Now, some people probably don't like that, but I love that. And the reason that's happening is because of a few talents. Blood Plague deals its damage in half the duration, and the second scythe of Exterminate applies Blood Plague. We also have things like Rapid Decomposition, Coagulopathy, and Sanguine Ground. These 3 things make it huge. Obviously, this helps Umbilicus. We've talked about this a million times over Dragonflight. But what might potentially not be obvious is we have a new talent, basically Consumption, okay? So that's been in the game, but Consumption is now a very different spell. I made videos on this already, but the spell itself, again, we'll look at overall. Where is it? Can anybody see it? Where is it? Where is it? Hello? Oh, okay, it's fucking 0 DPS. Does not do damage, so obviously that means it does not do healing. Yeah, well that's 0. That's like not overall. Let's see. So yeah, it doesn't do anything basically. Competing with Tombstone for healing, that's not good. So this spell is horrendous. It does absolutely nothing. As I've been saying for years now, it needs pretty much like a 1000% damage buff. But it might still be the best talent in the tree because on top of using it, it causes your Blood Plague to occur for 30 to damage to occur 50% more quickly for 8 seconds. Okay. Now 8 seconds out of a 30-second CD is pretty high uptime. But then you have Carnage. Each time an enemy strikes your blood shield, the cooldowns of Blood Drinker and Consumption have chance to be reset. I was getting maybe 1 reset every other, like basically like 1 reset a minute. Somebody says you can see where this is supposed to be. I don't know where. People were saying that maybe it's on Wowhead, but I did not, like somebody said it's supposed to be something per minute. I don't know where that's happening. But regardless, it's not happening a lot. I did have it a couple of times where it was like back-to-back uses. Maybe like 2 resets and then a 3rd use because the spell's just back up kind of thing. But it doesn't really matter. This talent is completely useless for the mastery. It does absolutely nothing. If you watch my footage from the stream, you will see when I use the spell, you get like a sliver of a mastery bar. Like you barely can even see the little, it's a tiny little baby absorb on the health bar. But it doesn't matter because even 1 extra use per minute is a massive DPS increase. And it's not just a massive DPS increase, it's also a massive HPS increase. As you see, Blood Plague now doing 70 million, did 14% of our actual healing, and then feeds directly into Umbilicus, which did another 12.5%. Now, I don't have weak ores working properly because I don't know what's going on with weak ores. I guess they're just not working. But yeah, dude, this is insane. This is just crazy fun. I loved it in Night Fate D&D as well. Whenever you put a spell and it's passive and it has tons of different interactions, it's totally the most fun for me. So we talked about it maybe having Bloodshot make the spell do 25% more damage, but that just seems really unlikely because you have to use it when you have a Blood Shield anyway, so there's going to be times when you don't even get that value. I don't know. It's a mess. I don't think Bone Shield's going to work out. I don't know if these spells are supposed to do this little damage. And I don't know if Deathbringer is supposed to be our top damage. Like, these interactions are our top DPS spells. I assume that's probably intentional. Like, that's probably right. All I know is it's the most fun I've had playing Blood DK in a long time. On top of content that was frustrating, unfun, very confusing. Felt like I was behind the 8 ball the whole day of 6 hours of streaming. Still had more fun playing Blood DK than anything else. So, I don't know. If anybody else has done the dungeons or you're more experienced with them than I am, please feel free to leave some thoughts on it. The testing window was not... I didn't feel like I was very successful. I didn't feel like I learned a lot, but yeah, I can say comfortably that Blood DK with Deathbringer is what I will be picking, and if it continues to be as strong as it is right now, it's just so passively powerful. I love that. This exact build is probably what I'll be playing moving forward. The other thing about the grips, I feel like it's going to be really hard to get used to this. And wasting Gorfiends on that is tough. It really feels like you're going to need the Gorfiend silence a lot. And it's going to be really tough to use it as a defensive CD, unfortunately. So those are some updated thoughts on all that. But let me know what you guys think about all this stuff, man. And we'll see you guys soon. Hopefully be back with some more regular Mythic Plus videos this weekend. But yeah, it was a wild ride on the beta there. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.